He invited an alien woman to dinner. Her reaction left him stunned. The city pulsed with artificial light as the evening hum of hover traffic blended with the occasional chirp of a drone. Recalibrating its course, a shimmering force field divided the upper sky lanes from the lower, a necessary precaution. Ever since that unfortunate incident involving a tourist shuttle, a rogue delivery bot, and an unlucky flock of synthetic pigeons beneath the neon glow of advertisements promising everything from memory-enhancing implants to self-heating socks, Daniel Graves sat in the break room of the Xenotech Research Institute, gripping a lukewarm cup of synth coffee like it was a lifeline. He stared at the empty seat across from him, the seat where Lyra usually sat, the seat that for months had been the focal point of his nervous, self-inflicted misery. Okay, he muttered to himself, shifting uncomfortably. No big deal, just a question normal people ask each other out all the time. I'm a normal person, probably. Across the room, Marcus, his best friend and personal tormentor, leaned back in his chair, watching with a smirk that suggested he was enjoying the slow motion train wreck unfolding before him. Dan, buddy, I can literally hear you psyching yourself out from here, Marcus drawled, kicking his feet up onto the table. You're going to combust before you even open your mouth. I'm fine, Daniel insisted. Absolutely not fine. Yeah, you look like you're about to challenge your own shadow to a duel. Marcus took a lazy sip from his own coffee, then winced. Why does this taste like regret? Daniel ignored him, hyper-focused on the sound of approaching footsteps. Liara had a distinct way of moving, not quite human, not quite unnatural. There was a grace to it, precise but fluid, like every motion had been measured before she even made it. And there she was. Liara entered the room, her long ears twitching slightly as she paused to survey the space. She was tall, but not intimidatingly so. Her dark, silken hair was tied back, revealing sharp, symmetrical features that somehow made Daniel's brain short-circuit. Whenever she so much as looked in his direction, she always carried herself with an air of quiet confidence which only made his impending catastrophe all the more inevitable. Liara, he blurted, before his courage could collapse in on itself. Hi, she turned toward him, tilting her head slightly in that way she did when processing social interactions. It was a habit he had grown to recognize, one of the few indicators that despite her polished demeanor, she still found humans occasionally baffling. Daniel, she said, her voice smooth as polished glass, you seem distressed. No, nope, not at all. He cleared his throat. Actually, I had a question for you. She blinked. A question, he confirmed, mentally bracing himself as if he were about to dive out of an airlock. Without a suit. Lyra's gaze sharpened, a flicker of curiosity passing over her expression. Daniel swallowed. So, would you? He inhaled sharply. Would you like to go out to dinner with me? The silence that followed was not the reaction he expected. Lyra's pupils dilated, her long ears twitched violently. She parted her lips as if to say something, then promptly shut them again. Her expression flickered between a dozen unreadable emotions, none of which seemed remotely close to a simple yes or no. Then, in a move that obliterated what little self-esteem Daniel had left, she took a step back, then another, then she gasped. And then she left, not in a flustered, oh, I must leave, an embarrassment kind of way, not even in an I need to process this information kind of way. She left in a full, immediate tactical retreat, like she had just been confronted with the knowledge that the room was about to explode. The door hissed shut behind her, leaving Daniel frozen in place. Marcus, who had witnessed the entire debacle, slowly set his coffee down and let out a low whistle. Well, he said, clapping Daniel on the back, I got to be honest, buddy, I've seen people get rejected before, but that was art. Daniel exhaled through his nose. Maybe she needed to go check something. Sure, Marcus said, nodding solemnly. Maybe she suddenly remembered she left the oven on a spaceship in another galaxy. Daniel groaned and let his head fall onto the table. I don't understand. That wasn't even a weird way to ask, right? That was normal. Marcus hummed. You know, unless dinner means something wildly different in her culture. Daniel stiffened. Like what? Oh, I don't know. Maybe you just asked if you could hunt and devour her ancestral ghost, or challenged her to mortal combat over a plate of spaghetti. Marcus grinned. What if you just proposed and you don't even know it? Daniel lifted his head just enough to glare at him. That's not helping. Marcus shrugged. Hey, I'm just Saying that was not a normal reaction. You didn't just get rejected, my friend, you got rejected with emergency. Protocols. Daniel let out a strangled noise. I need to fix this, yes, Marcus said. Please, if only for the sake of science. Scrambling for his data pad, Daniel pulled up the Institute's internal messaging system. His fingers hovered over the screen. What could he even say? Hey, sorry for accidentally triggering a fight or flight response in you, my bad. Want to try again? Number no, that was terrible. Hey, I have no idea what just happened, but I swear I wasn't trying to challenge you to a blood pact. Also terrible. Finally, he settled on hey, I just wanted to check if you're okay. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. Simple, non-threatening, couldn't possibly make things worse. He hit send and then he waited and waited and nothing, not even a read receipt. Daniel let out a defeated groan and slumped back in his chair. I'm going to die alone. Marcus took another sip of his coffee. Yeah, but at least you'll have a great story for your obituary. Daniel, now fully committed to wallowing in misery, dropped his head onto the table again. Somewhere in the depths of the city, Liara was still gone, and whatever had just happened between them, it wasn't over, not by a long shot. The next morning, Daniel entered the research institute with all the confidence of a malfunctioning service bot trying to navigate a revolving door. His night had been long and sleepless, filled with frantic online searches about Valerie customs, most of which left him more confused than before. One forum claimed that Valerie viewed eye contact during a meal as an act of courtship. Another suggested that inviting one to dinner was akin to a legally binding contract to exchange life debts. A third post was just someone ranting about how the Valerie had better hair than humans, which, while true, wasn't particularly helpful. Lyra had not responded to his message, which meant either she was deliberately avoiding him, or she had fled the planet to escape the horror of his casual attempt at romance, or worst case scenario, he had accidentally offended her so deeply that she was currently filing an intergalactic restraining order. He didn't know which option was worse. As he made his way to the lab, Marcus fell into step beside him, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. Morning, lovebird. Daniel groaned. Not in the mood? That's fine, because I am definitely in the mood to witness more of this train wreck. Marcus shoved a coffee cup into Daniel's hands. I got you extra caffeine, you'll need it. Why? Daniel asked wearily. Marcus grinned because Lara's back. Daniel nearly choked on his coffee. She's what she came in early, looks totally normal, like she didn't just run out of here like you invited her to a ritual sacrifice. Daniel stopped in his tracks. Did she say anything about me? Marcus took a slow, exaggerated sip of his drink. Nope. Daniel stared at him. You're enjoying this too much. I am. Yeah. Marcus clapped him on the back. All right, champ, time for round 2. Go in there, act casual, and try not to send her into another existential crisis. Daniel inhaled deeply. He could do this. He would act normal, calm, rational. This was a totally fixable misunderstanding. He stepped into the lab. Lara was at her workstation, scanning something on her holo display. She looked composed, perfectly at ease, as if last night had never happened. No sign of distress, no evidence that she had spent hours agonizing over the interaction like he had. Daniel approached cautiously, clearing his throat. Hey. She turned her gaze, landing on him with a measured slowness. Daniel, okay, that was progress at least. She hadn't immediately bolted. He scratched the back of his neck. I just wanted to check if you're okay after yesterday. Lara stared at him for a moment, then to his absolute horror, she said, you do not know what you have asked. Daniel blinked. I don't. She exhaled, glancing around the lab before stepping closer to him, lowering her voice as she said, Valerie, do not engage in casual invitations to dine. To ask one to a meal is not simple. Oh no. Marcus had been right. He had just proposed intergalactic marriage. I didn't mean anything serious, Daniel stammered. I swear it was just a normal human dinner invitation. Liara studied him carefully, as if trying to decide whether or not to believe him. Finally, after a long pause, she tilted her head. Your intent may have been casual, but the words you spoke were not. Daniel felt himself sweat. Okay, so what exactly did I say? Lyra hesitated, then, in a voice that suggested she was choosing her words carefully, she said, among my people such a request is not merely a gesture of companionship, it is an inquiry of bonding. Daniel's brain Short-circuited bonding, he echoed weakly. Yes, as in like, he gestured vaguely. Like a deep emotional bond, yes, a permanent bond. Liara hesitated for a fraction of a second before nodding. Daniel's soul briefly left his body. Okay, wow, that's a lot. He let out a nervous laugh. So just to clarify, I asked you to dinner, and in Valari culture, that means what lifelong commitment? Lara's ears twitched. Essence. Daniel made a strangled noise. I see you did not know. She studied him, her expression unreadable. That is somewhat of a relief. Daniel blinked. Wait, relief? Liara let out a quiet breath, almost too soft to be noticed. It was unexpected, right, because what every woman wanted was a surprise, accidental proposal from an oblivious human coworker. He ran a hand down his face. Liara, I am so sorry. I swear that was not what I meant. I believe you. Her expression softened slightly, which is why I am willing to correct the misunderstanding. Daniel felt a flicker of hope. Really? Yes. She straightened once again, composed, but to do so you must meet me outside the city tonight. Daniel blinked. Wait, tonight? Lara nodded. There is something you must see. Daniel hesitated. Is this a Velari thing, or am I about to be lured into the wilderness to be sacrificed? A flicker of amusement crossed her features. Not a sacrifice. He let out a breath. Great, that's comforting. She turned back to her workstation. I will send you the coordinates. Daniel took a moment to process what had just happened. Lara wasn't angry. She wasn't exiling him to the void, and against all odds she was giving him a chance to fix this. That was good, probably, unless this was actually just step one of some elaborate Valari revenge ritual. Marcus, who had been eavesdropping shamelessly from the next workstation, sauntered over. The moment Liara walked away. I told you it meant something, he said smugly. Daniel groaned. Please do not say I told you so right now. Marcus smirked. Oh, I wasn't going to. Daniel shot him a skeptical look. I was going to say, Marcus continued, grinning, that if you die in the wilderness tonight, can I have your office chair? Daniel threw his coffee stirrer at him as Marcus cackled. Daniel sighed and pulled out his data pad. He had a feeling tonight was going to change everything. The outskirts of the city were not a place Daniel typically found himself. The urban sprawl of neon lights and skyward towers gave way to something quieter, darker, less curated by human engineering. The air smelled different out here, crisper, tinged with the faint metallic hum of the planet's natural atmosphere beyond the city's environmental regulators. In the distance, the dome skyline still pulsed with artificial light, but here at the edge of civilization things felt older, less controlled, and Daniel was feeling wildly out of place. Okay, he muttered, checking the coordinates Liara had sent. He was standing near what looked like an abandoned hover freight station, the kind used decades ago before anti-grav supply chains had fully automated. Now it was a skeleton of a past-era metal scaffolding, stretching up like the ribs of some long-dead beast. This is definitely the setting of a horror movie. His communicator buzzed. He checked the message. Lyra, do not be alarmed when I arrive. Remain still. Daniel frowned. That's not a reassuring text. A beat of silence stretched between him and the surrounding dark. Then, without warning, a sound, high-pitched, eerie, cut through the stillness. Not mechanical, not quite organic, but something between the two. It sent a shiver up his spine. He turned toward the noise just as a sleek, elongated shape descended from the sky. Daniel's jaw nearly unhinged. Liara had arrived, but not in the way he expected. She wasn't on foot. She wasn't stepping gracefully out of some fancy Valari transport number. She was flying, or no, not quite. She was being carried. A shimmering craft, silent as a whisper, hovered just above the ground. It had no visible thrusters, no obvious propulsion system. It wasn't like any human or known alien tech he'd ever seen. It shimmered against the night, half invisible, shifting as if it were made of liquid light, and from that craft a field of energy extended outward, lifting Lyra down. Daniel barely resisted the urge to take a step back. She landed smoothly, effortlessly, her boots barely making a sound on the metal ground. The energy field dissipated the moment she touched solid earth. The ship remained hovering. Lyra looked at him. You did not run. Daniel stared at her, then at the ship, then back at her. I thought about it. Her ears twitched in what might have been amusement. You are unharmed physically, yes, emotionally undetermined. He gestured wildly toward the ship. What is that? She regarded him for a moment, then glanced back at the hovering craft. It is Difficult to explain, Daniel exhaled, running a hand down his face. Okay, cool. Love a good mystery spaceship. Lara tilted her head. You are handling this better than I anticipated. Oh, don't worry, Daniel said, voice climbing an octave. I am internally panicking, just trying to keep the screaming inside. Her gaze softened slightly. You are not in danger. He wasn't sure he believed that yet, but he nodded anyway. Right, okay, so what now? Liara exhaled. I need you to see something. She turned toward the ship, gesturing for him to follow. Daniel hesitated. Every instinct in his body screamed that this was the part in the movie where the idiot protagonist ignored every red flag and got vaporized. Then again, Liara was the one inviting him in, and if she had wanted to vaporize him, she'd had plenty of opportunities to do so already. He inhaled sharply, then forced himself to step forward. If I die, I'm haunting Marcus. Lara didn't comment, but he swore. Her lips twitched slightly. The ship's surface rippled as they approached a doorway formed where none had been before, a smooth, organic transition rather than a mechanical one. Daniel tried not to think too hard about it as he stepped inside. The interior was disorienting. It was larger than it should have been. He knew logically that was impossible. He'd seen the ship's exterior, but inside the space stretched in a way that made his stomach twist. The walls pulsed with a soft bioluminescence, shifting between deep blues and purples like the inside of some enormous living nebula. It wasn't just a ship, it was alive. Daniel swallowed. Okay, south. Definitely not standard Valari tech. No, Lear admitted. He turned to her. Then what is it? She hesitated, then after a moment she said, it is part of me. Daniel blinked. I what? She lifted a hand, and as if in response, the ship's interior pulsed, the light shifting suddenly. This vessel is not built, it is grown. Lara's voice was quiet, careful. It is connected to me, to my lineage. Daniel exhaled slowly. I'm going to be honest, I don't know how to process that. That is why I brought you here. She stepped forward, placing a hand against the wall. The surface responded, immediately shimmering at her touch. A portion of it peeled away, revealing a viewing screen, a window into the stars. Above, Daniel's breath caught. The sky stretched wide, but something was different. The stars shimmered oddly, their patterns unfamiliar. He frowned. That's not the usual night sky. No, Lyra said softly. It is not. Daniel turned to her, heart hammering. What does that mean? She looked at him then, and for the first time since he'd met her, there was something in her expression, something unguarded. I am not who you believe me to be. Silence stretched between them. Then, after a long pause, Daniel rubbed his temples. Okay, but just to clarify, does this mean my dinner invitation wasn't an accidental marriage proposal? Lara blinked then to his absolute shock. She laughed. It was soft, almost disbelieving, but it was real. No, she admitted it was not. Daniel exhaled dramatically. Fantastic, that's a relief. Liara shook her head, something almost fond in her expression. You are strange. So I've been told. For a moment, the weight of the situation seemed lighter, but Daniel knew deep down that everything had just changed, and he had no idea what he just got himself into. Daniel wasn't sure what he had expected when Liara said she wasn't who he thought she was. Maybe some dramatic reveal that she was royalty in exile. Maybe a confession that she was a rebel fugitive hiding from an intergalactic crime syndicate. Maybe, just maybe, an admission that she was actually a very advanced AI, and that he had been unknowingly flirting with a sentient hologram this whole time. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared him for what she actually said. I am not Val-Ari. Daniel stared at her, unblinking. I'm sorry. What? Lara's long ears twitched slightly, a small flicker of tension breaking through her usual composure. I am not Val-Ari, she repeated. Daniel pointed at her. But you look Ari. She sighed. Yes, you sound Val-Ari. Another sigh. Yes, you have the ears. Her ears twitched again, this time in mild irritation. Yes. Daniel threw up his hands. Then forgive me for being wildly confused. She turned away, pressing a palm to the living wall of the ship. The surface responded, instantly rippling outward like water disturbed by a stone. A new panel formed, displaying a slow-moving star map. Daniel recognized none of the constellations. My people are not from this sector, Liara said, voice quieter. Now, not from any known Valeri colony, not from any system humans have explored. Daniel swallowed. So where are you from? She hesitated. A place that no longer exists. Daniel had approximately 1,000 follow-up questions to that statement. Unfortunately, none of them came out in a remotely intelligent order, so okay, hold on, you're saying you're not Valari, but you're clearly Valari adjacent, and also your ship is alive, and you are connected to it, and oh yeah, apparently you're from a place that no longer exists. He exhaled sharply. Liara, you are so bad at easing Guy into an existential crisis. She gave him a look. You are handling this well. I'm not. I am barely keeping it together. He threw his hands in the air. I don't even have a frame of reference for this. The last big surprise I had to process was that Marcus stole my lunch out of the company fridge last week. This is not the same scale. Lyra's lips twitched slightly, but she quickly masked it with a cough. Daniel groaned, rubbing his temples. Okay, let's try to stay on course here. If you're not Valari, then what are you? She studied him for a long moment before responding. My people. She paused, correcting herself. My kind were once something else, something before the Ari. Daniel frowned before she nodded. Long ago, before recorded history, before the Valari were what they are today, there was another. She searched for the right word. Another branch of our species. Daniel's brain immediately latched onto the obvious comparison, like Neanderthals and Homo sapiens. Lyra considered this for a moment, then nodded yes, a close analogy. He exhaled. Okay. Great, got it, except Neanderthals are extinct. Something flickered across Lara's face. It wasn't quite pain, but it was close. Yes, she said, they are. Daniel stared at her. The implication sank in fast. Wait, are you telling me that you're kind? She inclined her head slightly. We were meant to be gone. The words settled heavily between them. Daniel swallowed. So what happened? Lara turned back to the glowing star map. The Valari evolved, changed their societies, advanced in one direction and ours in another. We were once a unified people, but eventually our kind, those who were bonded to the living ships, became seen as. She hesitated. Obsolete. Daniel's gut twisted. Obsolete. Our way of life was different, she said. We did not build as the Valari did. We did not construct vast cities, expand into planets, claim territory. We grew our homes. We became part of them. To us, the stars were not something to conquer, they were something to listen to. Daniel's voice was quieter now, and the Valari didn't like that. At first we coexisted. She touched the map again, and it shifted, revealing a planet green, luminous, untouched by war. But as time passed, they saw our ways as primitive, inefficient, weak. Daniel could already see where this was going. His stomach clenched. Lyra's expression didn't change, but there was a weight behind her words when she said, the Valari do not have a history of mercy. Silence. Daniel exhaled. So they wiped you out? Lara didn't respond immediately. Then quietly she said, tried. Daniel's skin prickled, and she met his gaze, or the last. A heavy stillness filled the space between them. Daniel felt like he should say something meaningful, something profound, something that acknowledged the sheer weight of what she had just told him. Instead, what came out was, so that definitely explains why you freaked out when I asked you to dinner. Liara stared at him, and then, in the most shocking event of the night, she laughed. It wasn't just a polite chuckle either, it was a real laugh, short and disbelieving, like she couldn't quite believe this was her reality. Daniel grinned. Despite everything, oh, don't encourage me. If you laugh once, I'm never going to stop making bad jokes. Lara exhaled, shaking her head. You are impossible. Yeah, I get that a lot. Another pause, then more seriously, Daniel said, Lyra, what do you want to do now? Her gaze flickered toward the star map again. I don't know. Well, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. You could not do this alone. She looked at him, expression unreadable. You would help. I mean, I am already in this whole situation, he said. Might as well commit. Liara studied him for a moment. Then, with the faintest hint of amusement, she said, then I hope you are ready. Daniel let out a slow breath. Something told him he really wasn't. Daniel had made a lot of questionable decisions in his life. That time he tried to fix his own hover scooter and ended up accidentally magnetizing all the cutlery in his apartment. Not great. The moment he thought it would be a good idea to bet half a paycheck on an underground racing event that turned out to be rigged by a sentient AI named Turbo Steve. Worse, but casually agreeing to help Lara and apparently extinct secretly, not Valari alien navigate whatever cosmic mess she was tangled in. This might be his worst one yet, and yet as the ship hummed around him, the air thick with an odd Blend of biological warmth and technological smoothness. He didn't regret it, not yet anyway, so he said. Leaning against one of the strange pulsing walls of Lara's living ship, if we're doing this whole I help you stay alive while also processing an existential crisis thing, what's our next step? Lara studied the glowing star map. Before her, she was unreadable as ever, but something in the way she stood shoulders a fraction tense her ears. Slightly angled back told him she was calculating more than just their next move. You have skills, she said finally. Daniel blinked. Wow, that sounded almost like a compliment. She gave him a sideways glance. You are unpredictable. That's a nice way of saying I make terrible decisions. Unpredictability is a strength. Daniel squinted at her. Liara, I need you to say that you think I'm useful just once, please. She ignored that completely. You are connected to human networks. Yes, you are a registered citizen of this world and you have access to places I do not. Daniel frowned. You mean because the Valari are still looking for you? Lara didn't respond immediately, but the way her jaw tensed was answer enough. Daniel exhaled. Okay, so you need me to do some recon that I can do. I mean, I'm not technically a spy, but I did once eavesdrop on an entire board meeting by pretending to be an IT technician. Lara's brow arched, and that worked. Corporate is scared of it, Daniel said. If you hold a data pad and look slightly annoyed, people just assume you belong. She tilted her head, considering this new piece of human knowledge that is useful. I am useful, Daniel said, pointing at her. You heard it, you admitted it. Lyra sighed. This was a mistake, you can't take it back now, it's out there. Ignoring him, she turned back to the map. The display zoomed in, shifting from vast celestial expanses to the intricate web of a planetary city. The glowing layout was unmistakable. Daniel recognized the shape of the district immediately. That's he narrowed his eyes. That's Dawnspire Plaza. Liara nodded. There is someone there who may have information on my kind. Daniel crossed his arms. And by may have information, do you mean definitely has information, or there's a 90% chance this ends with me running for my life? Lyra hesitated. Daniel groaned. Great, he is an information broker, she said. A collector of secrets. Daniel made a face. I hate those guys, you know one. Oh yeah, plenty. The last one I dealt with tried to charge me triple for information I already knew. He called it a verification fee. Lyra looked vaguely disgusted. This one is worse. Daniel clapped his hands together. Oh fantastic, Lyra continued. He is known as Keshvara. Daniel's groan was instant. Lyra frowned. You know of him? Oh, I wish I didn't, Daniel muttered. Vera is a nightmare. He's a paranoid smug, 3 steps ahead kind of nightmare. He will expect deception, Lyra said. Well, lucky for us, I'm terrible at deception. She gave him a flat look. You infiltrated a board meeting that was different. That was corporate espionage, spying, office culture. Liara's ears twitched. And you expect me to believe you cannot lie? Oh, I can lie, Daniel said. I'm just not great at it. Lara exhaled. I am beginning to regret this plan. Too late now. Daniel clapped his hands together. All right, so what's the approach? We walk in there and hope for the best. We should be cautious. Lara said. Vara does not work alone. Yeah, I gathered that from the fact that every time I've seen him, he's been surrounded by a dozen bodyguards and at least one murder drone. Lyra considered this a stealth approach. Then Daniel blinked. I was joking. You are useful, she said, and this time it was absolutely on purpose. Daniel groaned. You're enjoying this? She didn't confirm or deny it. Instead, she tapped the display and the ship's interface shifted, adjusting to zoom in. Further on Dawnspire Plaza, the map highlighted a building in the lower quadrant, a sprawling complex with multiple security checkpoints and entryways. Vera operates out of this location, Lara said. We will need to find a way inside. Daniel squinted at the display. Okay, I do know a guy who might owe me a favor. Lara turned to him. And this person, technically he works maintenance at one of VAR's secondary locations, but he's got terrible impulse control when it comes to gambling, and I may have helped him out of a bad situation. Once Lyra studied him, you associate with very questionable people. I like to think of it as having a diverse social network. She exhaled. If this contact can get us access, we will use them. Daniel nodded. Then after a moment of hesitation, he said, Liara, this whole thing, you being the last of your kind, the Velari trying to erase that, what's the end goal here? She was Silent for a long moment, then quietly she said, "Survival." Daniel met her gaze, and for the first time he realized just how much weight she had been carrying. He nodded, then, "Let's make sure you get it." Daniel adjusted the borrowed maintenance uniform for the 10th time and scowled at his reflection in the polished steel panel beside the service elevator. The jumpsuit was at least 2 sizes too big, smelled faintly of industrial-grade cleaning solvent, and most importantly made him look nothing like a professional infiltrator. "Are you sure this is going to work?" he muttered, shifting uncomfortably. Liara, who looked infuriatingly composed in a sleek disguise of her own, didn't even glance at him. "You said this contact of yours could get us inside." Daniel sighed. "Yeah, but that was before I saw this disguise." He gestured down at himself. "I look like a janitor who got lost on the way to his own shift." Lara did give him a glance at that. "Daniel, this is a maintenance uniform, yes, but a badly fitting one. Your appearance is not the priority. That's easy for you to say. Your disguise makes you look like a corporate spy." She blinked, then tilted her head slightly. "Thank you, that wasn't a compliment." Before Lyra could respond, the service elevator shuddered and let out a chime. The door slid open, revealing the dimly lit corridor leading into Keshvira's information hub. Daniel straightened. "Okay, showtime." The plan was simple, at least as simple as breaking into a paranoid information broker's lair could be. Daniel's old acquaintance Ren had managed to get them access to the maintenance level under the guise of a routine systems check. From there, they'd locate Vera's central data archives and extract whatever information he had on the Valeries. Cover-up of Lyra's species. Of course, plans and reality rarely lined up. The corridor was mostly empty save for the occasional drone humming softly as it patrolled the air. Smelled faintly of metal and ozone. Classic high-end security tech. Daniel resisted the urge to fidget as they moved, keeping his pace steady. Ren said, "The access point is just ahead," he murmured. Lara nodded, scanning their surroundings with a practiced eye. Her long ears twitched, once picking up something Daniel couldn't hear. "There are 2 guards near the primary archive entrance." Daniel grimaced. "Of course there are. You expected otherwise." "I was hopping otherwise." Lara considered for a moment. "Can you distract them?" Daniel exhaled. "I mean, yeah, but what's your plan?" "I will handle the security override." That sounded alarmingly vague. "By handle, do you mean?" Lara was already moving. Daniel muttered a curse and picked up his pace, heading toward the guards. They were exactly as he remembered from his past run-ins with Vera Security Board. Overconfident and equipped with enough firepower to vaporize an unlucky intruder. Time to wing it, he plastered on his best "I belong here" expression and strode forward with purpose, adjusting his uniform like an annoyed technician. "Hey fellas." The guard straightened. "Who are you?" Daniel rolled his eyes. "Who do you think I am?" "Your system flagged an anomaly in the environmental controls on this level. I'm here to check it out." The guards exchanged glances. "We weren't notified of any." "Yeah, because if the system worked properly, I wouldn't have to be here now, would I?" Daniel shot back, crossing his arms. "But sure, if you want me to log a service delay report, I can find one of the guards. Where's your clearance badge?" Daniel hesitated for a fraction of a second, then before the guard could get suspicious, a loud screeching noise filled the hallway, followed by a rapid flickering of the overhead lights. The guard spun toward the disturbance just as the security panel near the archive doors sparked violently. Daniel did not hesitate this time. "Yep, see, that's the anomaly. Thanks for proving my point." The guards, thoroughly distracted, started bickering about faulty wiring. Daniel seized the moment and slipped toward the now unlocked archive door, sliding inside just as Liara finished her override. Inside, the room was dimly lit, lined with sleek black servers humming with stored data. Liara was already at the central console, her fingers moving swiftly across the alien interface. "You planned that, didn't you?" Daniel muttered. Lara didn't look up. "I calculated that a malfunction would be the most effective distraction." Daniel huffed. "You could have warned me. Would that have made your performance more convincing?" He wanted to argue he really did, but frustratingly, she had a point. Instead, he turned his attention to the console. "All right, what are we looking at?" Lara's eyes narrowed as lines of foreign script scrolled across the screen. "Vera's archives are extensive. I need to isolate the data pertaining to my people." Daniel rubbed his temples. "Right, and how long will that take?" "Seconds." "Oh," he blinked. "That's wow. Okay, I Efficient, yeah, I noticed Lara's fingers moved in rapid precision and suddenly the screen displayed a string of data that even Daniel could tell was important. Lara's expression darkened. What? Daniel asked. What is it? She hesitated. This confirms my suspicion. The Valari did not simply erase records of my kind, they actively hunted them. Daniel felt his stomach drop. You mean they eliminated anyone who knew the truth? Lara's voice was quiet, but there was an edge of something cold in it. Daniel swallowed. Okay, so that means you're really in danger. She exhaled. Yes. He ran a hand through his hair. Fantastic. Lara was already transferring the data to a secure drive. We should leave before they realize we have accessed this. Daniel didn't argue. Good call. They moved quickly, slipping back toward the exit. The guards were still grumbling about the faulty wiring, and Daniel resisted the urge to smirk as they passed. It was only when they were safely back inside Lara's ship, the stolen data secured, that the weight of everything hit him. So Daniel said, rubbing his face. Now we know the Val-Ari just covering up your species. They're trying to erase it. Lyra nodded. Daniel exhaled. Well, guess that means we need a new plan. Liara's gaze met his. Yes, and quickly Daniel cracked his knuckles. All right, then let's figure out how to take down a galactic conspiracy. Daniel had imagined a lot of possible endings to this mess. Most of them weren't great. A few involved running for his life, one or two even included an explosion that he sincerely hoped would be somewhere else instead of right behind him, but here he was alive, still intact and sitting in the pilot seat of Liara's ship, watching the last remnants of the Valari conspiracy crumble across the hollow screen. Every major news feed in the sector was broadcasting the same explosive story, undeniable proof that the Valari High Council had systematically erased all records of Liara's people, hunted down survivors, and manipulated galactic history itself. The fallout was immediate. Public outrage erupted across civilized space. Governments distanced themselves from the Valari allies, turned to rivals. Even Valari citizens, ones who had no idea what their leaders had done, were demanding answers. It was chaos, beautiful, well-deserved chaos. Lyra stood beside him, arms crossed, her long ears tilted in thought as she studied the news reports. She was unreadable, but Daniel had spent enough time around her to recognize when she was thinking too hard. You okay? He asked. Her golden eyes flicked toward him. I am uncertain. Daniel frowned. Which part? All of it. That was fair. He gestured to the screens. We did it. You did it. The truth is out there. No one can erase it again. Yes, her voice was steady, but there was something distant in it, and yet my people remain lost. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. Not all of them. We found some records, names, locations, survivors. He hesitated. It's not everyone, but it's something. Lyra was quiet for a long moment. It is more than I ever expected, she admitted. He watched her carefully. He'd seen her fight, argue, break into highly secured data vaults, and manipulate an entire criminal syndicate into giving her what she needed. But now, when the mission was finally over, she looked uncertain, as if she'd spent so long focused on the goal that she had no idea what came next. He exhaled. So what now? Liara's ears twitched slightly. You are asking me? Well, yeah. You're the one with the erased history and the evil space empire breathing down your neck. Seems like you get first say. She considered this. I must seek out the survivors, find what remains of my people. Okay, Daniel nodded. Sounds like a good plan, and after that she hesitated. I do not know. He grinned. While first time for everything. She shot him a look. I am allowed to be uncertain. Yeah, it's just weird hearing you say it, she hummed thoughtfully. Then, to his surprise, she turned fully to face him. And what of you, Daniel? He blinked. Me? Yes. She tilted her head slightly. Your part in this is over. You retrieved the information. You exposed the truth. You could return to your life now. Daniel scratched the back of his neck. Yeah, I mean, I could. Liara studied him. But you will not, he sighed dramatically. Look, I've invested in this whole mess now. I've put in time, effort, emotional distress. You were emotionally distressed. Okay, mildly distressed. Lear gave him a skeptical look. All right, fine. There was some moderate distress. He waved a hand. Point is, I can't just walk away. Who else is going to keep you from doing things the efficient but wildly risky way? Lara's lips quirked slightly. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was close. Daniel stretched out in the pilot seat. Besides, I've got no pressing engagements. My apartment lease is expired. My job's Probably not too happy about me disappearing for weeks. Do you intend to inform them no they can figure it out? Liara arched an eyebrow. That is irresponsible, says the galactic fugitive. She exhaled. You are impossible, and yet you keep me around. She didn't argue. Instead she glanced toward the navigation panel. The ship was already set on a course toward the first known coordinates of a surviving member of her species. Her expression softened just slightly. Thank you, Daniel. He blinked. Wait for real for everything, she clarified. For your help for staying. Daniel opened his mouth, then hesitated. He had a lot of responses to that, most of them sarcastic, but instead he shrugged, leaning back in his chair with a grin. He said casually, you still owe me dinner. Lara blinked. Then to his surprise she laughed. It wasn't a loud laugh or long, but it was real, and it made something warm settle in his chest. Very well, she said, perhaps it is time I fulfilled that promise. Daniel smirked. I knew I'd win that bet eventually. As the ship accelerated toward its next destination, toward the unknown, toward whatever came next, Daniel realized something. This wasn't just Lyra's story anymore, it was theirs, and that felt pretty damn. The end.